So, learning Russian, day 10. Today we're on Russian verbs of motion. Some people think learning about the verbs of motion is one of the hardest concepts in the Russian language. The truth is, it's not so difficult if you just try to understand them one step at a time. Sounds reasonable. However, it's quite an important concept, as motion verbs are among the most used in any language. We have broken this into several parts, they say, so just learn one part at a time, and if there is too much information in this lesson. That doesn't make sense. Anyway, a verb of motion, as the name suggests, is simply a verb that will take you from one place to another. For example, verbs like go, walk, run, swim or fly. The reason they are special in Russian is that Russian uses special prefixes or different forms to explain even more with one word. It's going to be great. We will first discuss these verbs without the use of prefixes, then we will discuss the prefixes later. It tells us that a prefix is the couple of letters you put at the front of the word to add to its meaning, and they spell it's wrong because they put an apostrophe. Anyway, motion verbs without prefixes. To go. Let's start by looking at the words that could correspond to the English word go. Essentially, there is no word in Russian that is like the English word go. It's a bad start. Instead, Russians always indicate how they are going somewhere. Do you understand what that means? Here are the two most important verbs. Ходить, to go by foot, to walk. We can view the conjugation, we might do that later. Ездить and ехать. So there's four of them. To go by transport, drive, train, bus, etc. And the conjugations come later. The first thing you will notice is there are two similar Russian words corresponding to one English word. This is because Russians also indicate whether they are going in one direction or making a return trip. Reasonable? As it is often the case in Russian, you are able to say a lot with few words. As I said, very little with a lot of words, apparently. Each verb conjugates in the normal way. Click on the link next to the verb to view the fully conjugated forms. I ain't going there yet. The verb on the left, ходить or ездить, is the multi-directional verb, technically known as the indefinite. The verb on the right, and there's two, идти and ехать, is the unidirectional one-way verb, technically known as the definite. Here is how you use each form, perhaps that'll make it a little bit clearer. The unidirectional one-way is either идти or ехать. Use, we're told, the unidirectional form when you are going in one direction or talking specifically about going in one direction. What does that mean rather than actually doing it? This form often corresponds to the continuous tenses in English, i.e. when you say I am or we are. Я иду на работу. I'm going to work by foot. Мы идем в Москву. We are going to Moscow by transport. Завтра мы идем в Лондон. Tomorrow we are going to London by transport. Куда вы идете? Idiotic. Where are you going by foot? Multi-directional, return trips in general. Ходить and ездить. Use the multi-directional form when you are talking about actions in more than one direction. For example, a return trip. I never do actions in one direction. Also use this form when you are talking generally about going to somewhere or when there is no motion. How can you go somewhere if there's no motion? Or the number of directions is irrelevant. I don't have time to think about this when I use a verb. Каждый день я хожу в кино. Every day I go to the cinema. This is talking in general. Мы ходили на городу. We walked around the town and we were moving in a number of different directions. Вчера мы ездили в London. Yesterday we went to London by transport. And the return trip is implied. Oh no, this is like sentence. You should now be comfortable using these motion verbs in the present tense. These are the two most important. That's what it says. What does that mean? These are sorry about this. These are the two most important verbs of motion. My goodness. These are the two most important verbs of motion. And you will find them very useful. I think they mean these are the two most important verbs of motion, and you'll find them very useful, even as a beginner intermediate Russian speaker. We now... I have to switch this off for a moment. I can't carry on. Sorry. Other unprefixed verbs of motion. It says it again. Now that you are comfortable with the concept learnt in part 1, I think we've got there yet, you can easily apply the same concept to the other verbs of motion. With these verbs, the action is more specific than with the first two verbs you have learnt. There are no new concepts to learn in this part. Well, thank God for that. Here are the verbs. Click the link to see how they are conjugated. That's for another day. So, we now have two verbs to run. Begat and bejat. Two verbs to stroll. Bradit and bresti. To drive is either goniat or gnat. To climb. Two verbs. Yazit or yezit. It's difficult. To fly. Yetat or yetet. To swim and to sail, which apparently they don't make any difference, but there's two verbs for it. Ilyavat and libit. And to crawl is balzat or balsti. And there's a rarely used word, which is goniat or gnat, and it does not mean to drive by car. Why are they telling us this? It does not mean to drive by car. See, that was vadit and vesti. It means to force to move, as in to drive someone into a corner, to drive cattle to market. I don't know if I'm ever going to need to say this in Russian. It continues to part 3. Other unprefixed verbs of motion. To carry. The last set of unprefixed verbs of motion are verbs that indicate the concept of carrying. I carry things, so these verbs are a little different because there is an object that is transported or carried, of course. For example, the train transports passengers to Moscow. You will normally see these words translated as to carry, but their meaning, and they've spelt there wrong, their meaning is more general, and they could mean to transport or to take. Oh no, this is going to be complicated. You should translate them back to English depending on the context. Let's have a look at these verbs. Vazit and vesti is to carry by vehicle. Nosit jest is to carry or to wear. Vadit vesti to lead, to accompany or to drive a car. And taskat or tashit to drag and to pull. That thing that nobody can pronounce is not apparently the same as sh, but it's sh, like in borscht. Let's have a quick look at how each one is used. Возить and везти, generally this word corresponds to transport or to take by some means of vehicle. For example, in a sentence like, the train transports passengers to Moscow, or Ivan takes his daughter to school. Oh, I can't be bothered with all this. Oh, there's more. Prefixed verbs of motion. This brings us to one of the most hated parts of Russian for learners. You mean we haven't done it already? However, it's not so difficult at all. To all of the verbs above, it is possible to add different prefixes, and boy, have they been doing it. By placing a few extra letters at the front of these verbs, you can increase its meaning. This normally adds a direction to its meaning. For example, you could change the meaning of walk to walk in. As you can see in the above example, we normally achieve this in English by adding an adverb after the verb. Words like in, down, I thought they were prepositions, through, or across. Often it is also possible to do this by using a different verb. Walk in could be replaced by enter. Well, that's true. Now that we know what we're trying to do in English, let's have a look at how we can do it in Russian. If you find the concept of prefixes difficult, you could just remember each of these verbs, treating each verb as its own word. Mistake again, rather than a set of related verbs. This would be good for learners with a good memory for words. I kind of guess you need it. Other learners, who may be more conceptually minded, may choose to remember how all the prefixes work. We think it's best to do a little of both, kind of multi-directional. Once you understand this concept, you might find that you can suddenly decipher a whole lot of Russian verbs, if only, and the language may really open itself up to you. Oh, I've got a whole list of prefixes here. V, do, za, ob, ot, piri, bot, pri, pro, s, and u. Now let's see some examples of the prefixes in use. I knew this was coming. This is how you can use them with the primary motion verb, chodit or chiti. There's two verbs. Note that chiti becomes iti when used with prefixes. Why doesn't that surprise us? Oh, I'm just not going to even bother with all these lists. Why would any language put the sound v before ch? Vchodit. Oh no, that's wrong, because it's unstressed. The O becomes pronounced like an A. So, vchodit, unless, of course, the stress is on the O, and it's not indicated in this method, in which case it would be vchodit. And then, of course, we have voiti, for those who want to have to avoid, presumably, having to pronounce vchodit. Oh, God. Oh, we're nearly at the end. Okay. Now is the interesting bit. As these new verbs already indicate a definitive direction, they cannot be multidirectional, and they lose the concept of unidirectional or multidirectional that we learned above. So we've learned all this for nothing. Instead, the first word, that would be vchodit, is the imperfective aspect, and the second is the perfective. Refer to the section on aspects for more info. Not today. But the world is a cruel enough place at the moment anyway. So in the present tense, you will always use the first of these verbs above. This part is difficult. Thank you for admitting it. It is a good idea to have an understanding of how the prefixes work. If you hate grammar, I didn't before, but I certainly am now, you could simply remember each word. For example, here it comes again. I thought it might be vchodit, enter. However, if you do understand some of the concepts and you came across a word like vletat, you could work out that it meant to fly in. It doesn't say if it's multidirectional. Here are a couple of examples to finish with of how you could use the prefixes with different verbs. Samolyot прилетят в Москву. The plane arrives, and it arrives by flying. How the fuck else would it arrive? Oh, well, unless it drove there in Moscow. Самолет летает из Москвы. The plane departs, fly from. They can't even conjugate the simple English present, these people, and they're telling you all this shit in Russian. До свидания.